Welcome to Dark Verse. I'm Isaac Nightshade. Tonight's story is Vampire, Curse of the Blood Moon. Eli Mercer came home to bury his past, but Black Hollow remembers what he forgot. The moon rises red, the thirst awakens, and the thing inside him opens its eyes. You're not becoming a monster. You were always its skin. Chapter 1. The Return. Eli Mercer did not remember the trees being that tall. They stood like sentinels along the roadside, leaning slightly inward, their black limbs threadbare of leaves, as if bowing toward him. The fog curled around their trunks in slow, deliberate coils. It had been 17 years since he left Black Hollow, and yet it greeted him like a patient illness, quiet, familiar, incurable. The rental car's engine ticked quietly as he parked at the side of the road. The radio was dead, static only. No signal. He hadn't expected any. Black Hollow didn't want to be reached. He stared at the iron sign just ahead, crooked and half swallowed by vines. Welcome to Black Hollow population. 371 founded, 1823. He was almost certain the number hadn't changed since he was a child. He wondered absently if it ever would. The village appeared out of the fog like a photo left too long in water, soft around the edges, distorted. The streets were lined with shuttered homes, peeling paint, sagging porches. The grocery store had the same red sign with the missing O in FOOD. A black dog stood in the middle of the road, motionless, staring at Eli with pale eyes, then vanished behind a house before he could blink. He hadn't told anyone he was coming. There had been no need. His mother had died 3 days ago. Or she was supposed to have. The email, sent from the county clerk's office, was brief and clinical, listing her name, cause of death, heart failure, natural causes, and the date, October 9th. But today was only October 3rd. He had read it 3 times, refreshed his inbox, checked the headers. All correct. He hadn't told anyone. Not his colleagues, not his ex, not even himself in the mirror, where lately his reflection had begun to look back at him with something like suspicion. The house sat at the end of an unpaved road. Gravel crunched like bones beneath his boots as he approached. The gate, once a cheerful blue, was rusted to a color he couldn't name. It groaned as he pushed it open, resisting him like it had forgotten how. There were no birds, no wind, only the sound of his breath and the faint echo of it against the hollow silence of the world around him. The porch steps creaked beneath his weight. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled faintly of ash and lavender, his mother's perfume, the one she wore when she went to church. Dust floated in slow spirals through the dim light that filtered through the moth-eaten curtains. The living room looked unchanged, the floral couch with its faded pinks, the doilies, stiff with age, the grandfather clock that had never worked, ticking now softly. He turned toward the hallway. At the end of it, the basement door was shut. He didn't remember it being there. The bedroom was empty, the bed neatly made. On the nightstand, a photo of him and his mother from 1998. She was smiling. He was not. He had been 10. He picked up the frame. Behind the photograph, folded neatly, was a single sheet of paper. Yellowed. Her handwriting. Elliot, if you find this, it means you came back. You always said you wouldn't, but the hollow pulls, doesn't it? Like gravity, like breath. Don't go into the attic. Not yet. Wait until the blood moon passes. If it's not too late. I love you. I always did, even when I couldn't show it. Please forgive me. His name. Elliot. She always insisted on calling him by his full name, even after he began correcting everyone else to just Eli. That little note of hers curled something sour in his stomach. Grief, yes, but something else, too. Something like recognition. He folded the paper again carefully and placed it in his coat pocket. It felt heavier than it should. That evening he cooked scrambled eggs on the old stove. The gas burner clicked 3 times before lighting. The flames smelled sharp, metallic. He ate in silence, the same chair he'd sat in as a child, pressing into the same places on his spine. Everything in the house seemed to have memory. He washed. His plate and cup stood at the sink longer than necessary. The backyard was invisible through the fog, except for the silhouette of the weather vane atop the shed, spinning slowly, though no wind moved. The grandfather clock chimed once. Just once. It was 12:17. Later, he sat on the couch with his mother's journal. It had been hidden beneath a loose floorboard, wrapped in cloth. The pages smelled of mildew and rosewater. She had written in it only sporadically, mostly dated, around his childhood. Many of the entries were short, repetitive, confused. "They're calling again. I heard the scratching. It's under the skin now. I'm sure of it. Eli doesn't remember the red light, or he pretends not to. I've tried to forget too. But it's louder now. They're louder. October 9th approaches. The hollow will take again." He closed the journal. October 9th. Again. A drip echoed from somewhere in the house, irregular and wet. He waited for it to stop. It didn't. He walked the halls in his socks, following the sound. It wasn't coming from the bathroom, or the kitchen, or the sink. It was coming from the front door. He opened it slowly. The porch was empty. Fog clung to the steps like foam on a dying wave, but in the thin strip of dirt between the porch and the gate, just beneath the wind chime that had long since fallen silent, he saw them. Footprints, mud, dark and fresh, leading into the house. He blinked. His pulse thudded behind his eyes. They were boot prints, larger than his own. Not deep, not rushed, deliberate. He turned, stepping carefully back inside, his breath held like a note in his throat. The footprints continued inside, across the floorboards, drying now but still visible in streaked arcs, like someone had walked in just before him. They led toward the hallway, toward the basement door. But he looked again. There were no prints leading out. He backed away slowly, the old wood cold beneath his feet. The silence now had shape, something pressing against his ears, his teeth. He reached into his coat pocket for the note, for something to ground him. But it was gone. His fingers found only lint, the corners of his notebook. The paper had vanished. He turned back to the hallway. The basement door was slightly open. It hadn't been earlier. A low creak came from beneath the floorboards. Something was down there. Something had come in. Chapter 2. Familiar Shadows. Eli didn't sleep. Not exactly. He lay on the couch as the walls of the house shifted around him, not physically, but in that quiet way old homes do when left too long with their secrets. The creak of beams, the groan of settling weight, the imperceptible sound of something unseen crossing from one room to the next. He didn't dream. Or if he did, it wasn't a dream he could claim as his own. In it, the house had no windows, and the sky bled steadily, downward. By morning, the footprints had dried into faint smudges, like smoke prints on glass. He followed them again, slower this time, tracing each partial step across the floorboards to the base of the hallway. The basement door was closed now. He reached for the knob but stopped himself. His mother's note, gone from his coat, had warned him about the attic. Not the basement. But somehow that made it worse. He left the door alone. Instead, he returned to her journal. The book's spine had cracked overnight, brittle and worn. He hadn't remembered leaving it open, but it now rested on a different page than he recalled. The red star is not a planet. It breathes. It thinks. It waits until the skin softens. The entry was dated October 3rd, 1989. Eli would have been a child, 7, maybe 8. He recognized the year. It was the fall he'd missed nearly a month of school. Illness, they said, though no doctor had ever confirmed anything specific. He remembered lying in bed, listening to the walls whisper. And they had whispered. He had told his mother once. She hadn't responded. She'd simply placed a bowl of water beneath the window and told him not to speak when the wind blew from the east. Further entries grew more erratic. They said it was hereditary, but they lied. It's not the blood. It's the moon, the one that comes every 33 years, the one that listens. Eli doesn't remember the man in the woods, the silver-toothed one. But I saw him again today, just standing there, watching the house, watching Eli. I think it feeds on what we forget. The name Eli was scratched out in this entry and rewritten as Elliot. He closed the journal and stared into the cold fireplace. Ash clung to the grate like residue from a forgotten ritual. For a moment he saw something move in the blackened brick. Just a trick of light. Just that. He remembered the attic then. More precisely, he remembered not remembering the attic. There had never been a key, only a chain and a rusted padlock. As a child, he'd passed it without interest, as if whatever lay beyond it did not concern him. But now it loomed in his thoughts like a missing tooth, something his tongue could not stop returning to. He stood, crossed the hallway. The attic door was just ahead, padlock gone. He should have felt something, fear, maybe, curiosity, but instead he felt an eerie kind of calm, the way a person might feel while stepping through a dream they only half believed. The stairs were narrow and uneven. He climbed them slowly, each step creaking with the weight of memory. At the top, he reached out and touched the door. Cold, too cold. His hand recoiled involuntarily. He didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he returned to the living room, sat again, rubbed his temples. What was the phrase? The blood moon comes again. This time it will choose, the last line of the journal. He checked the final page. Same handwriting, but the ink looked fresher. It hadn't been the last page before. Had it? His headache bloomed behind his eyes like a bruise. The man with the silver teeth. A fragment of memory came to him, fast and sharp, a figure at the edge of the woods behind their house, standing perfectly still. Eli had watched him from the upstairs window. The man had not moved, had not blinked, and when Eli's mother came into the room, he'd asked her, "Why is he looking at me?" Her face had drained of color. She didn't answer. She only pulled the curtain shut and told him to never open that window again. He had forgotten that memory. Until now. Late afternoon dimmed into an early dusk. Fog crept again along the tree line, swallowing detail, reducing the world to silhouettes and suggestion. Eli hadn't eaten. He didn't feel hunger, only thirst. He poured himself a glass of water, but it tasted wrong, mineral-heavy, almost metallic. He spat it out and let the glass sit on the counter. It collected dust before his eyes. At some point he fell asleep, or he thought he had. It was dark again when he opened his eyes. The silence had shifted. That's how he would describe it later. Shifted, as if something had displaced the silence inside the house, pushed it aside to make room for something else. He sat up. No clocks ticked. No breeze whispered through the walls. The fog had pressed against the windows like breath. Then he heard it. A sound so faint it almost passed unnoticed. Creak. Once. Then again. He rose, slowly. It was coming from above. The attic. He walked carefully, deliberately, each step cushioning the noise of his own movement. His bare feet felt too warm against the floor, as if the house itself had gone. Cold. The stairs to the attic groaned again as he climbed. He paused just short of the top, held his breath. Another creak. This time unmistakable. The attic door was opening on its own. A line of blackness appeared where there had been solid wood, a widening slit in the dark. He didn't move, didn't speak. A sound came from the other side, wet, ragged, like something breathing but from lungs too deep. Then a whisper, low and feminine, came from within. "Elliot, is that you?" He stepped back, heart hammering. But the door kept opening, and something began to descend. Chapter 3. A Town That Sleeps Standing. Eli hadn't planned on walking to town. He hadn't planned anything, really. The morning had arrived slowly, as if the sun wasn't sure it should bother rising. A wan gray light crept over Black Hollow like an unwanted guest. The kind you let in out of politeness, but who never quite meets your eyes. The house had grown too still again. That silence, that waiting, curled into the corners of his mind, and he couldn't stay inside any longer. Not with the attic door still cracked. Not with the journal's final words still echoing behind his eyes. This time it will choose. He needed to see the town, see if the world still existed outside the perimeter of fog and memory. The road was uneven, more dirt than asphalt now, and slick with last night's dew. The trees hung close and low, their branches clawing toward each other across the sky like brittle fingers. The only sound was the steady, rhythmic tap of his boots. It wasn't until he reached the town's edge that he realized something was deeply wrong. The fog had retreated somewhat, revealing more than he wanted to see. Or, rather, less. Everything was intact. The buildings stood. The storefronts lined the main road like tired teeth. But there were no people, no cars, no sound, no movement, as if the town had been paused. The old clock tower loomed above the square, its hands frozen at 3:33. Eli stared up at it, unable to recall what time it had read the last time he was here. Maybe it had always been 3:33. That number crawled down his spine, settled in the base of his skull. The antique shop was boarded up. The diner had chairs still neatly stacked inside like they had closed for the night and simply never reopened. He passed the library. Its glass doors were fogged from within. Then he reached the church. The church had always unnerved him. Even as a child, its steeple had seemed too tall, its bell tower too narrow, as if it had been pulled from a different place entirely and shoved down into the middle of Black Hollow like a rusted nail. Now it was completely boarded shut. Plywood covered the doors and windows. A crude red X had been painted across the main entrance, and an old rosary hung broken from the handle, swinging gently in the windless air. Eli stepped closer. He thought he saw, through a crack in the boards, a figure seated in the pews, still, slouched, waiting. But when he blinked, the figure was gone. He took one step back, then another. "You came back." The voice startled him, dry and rasping. From behind, Eli turned. An elderly woman stood by the bus stop bench just across the street. Her coat was 2 sizes too large, and her hair was the color of ash. She leaned on a metal cane, one hand trembling slightly, as though resisting some unseen wind. He hadn't seen her before, or maybe she'd been standing there the whole time. "You remember me, Elliot?" she asked, her lips cracking into something that resembled a smile but wasn't. Eli felt something twitch behind his eyes. A flicker, a misfire of recognition. "I'm sorry," he said carefully. "Do I know you?" She didn't answer at first. She just looked at him, really looked, her pale eyes scanning his face like a puzzle she was trying to reassemble. "You look like him," she said finally. "But it's not just that. It's the weight. I can see it in your shoulders. You don't know what you are, do you? I think you have me confused with someone else." "No." Her smile faded. "I don't." He sat next to her without thinking. The bench was cold and slightly damp. The woman stared out toward the square. They don't come out anymore. Not during the days. Not since the last red sky. Eli didn't know what to say. Her presence unnerved him, but not in the way the house or the fog had. She wasn't wrong. That was the most terrifying part. Everything she said carried the hum of something familiar, like a dream he'd buried so deep it had grown roots. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Maeve," she said. "But that doesn't matter." "What do you mean?" "What I am." Maeve looked at him again, and this time he saw tears forming. They welled slowly in the creases beneath her eyes, thick and dark, not clear like normal tears. They were red, and as they spilled over, tracing lines down her face, she said only one word: "Vampire." Eli's skin prickled. He almost stood, but didn't. "Excuse me." Her voice was firmer now, her eyes locked to his. "You died, or part of you did. You were a child. It came for you early. The Hollow doesn't always wait for the blood moon. Sometimes it gets greedy." He opened his mouth, closed it again. Memories surged, half-formed, incomplete. The illness, the windows sealed, shut, the voice in the walls, the man with silver teeth standing in the woods. "I didn't," Eli began, but the words wouldn't come. "You're not cursed," Maeve said softly. "You're chosen. There's a difference. One is punishment. The other is inheritance." A truck turned the corner behind them, its headlights cutting briefly through the thick air. Maeve stood too suddenly for her fragile frame. Eli reached out instinctively. "Wait, please, I need you to explain." But she was already walking, fast, too fast for someone with a cane. And then she stepped directly into the road. The truck's horn blared, a long, anguished scream. Time snapped forward, metal screeched, and just like that, Maeve was gone. The truck skidded to a stop. A man jumped out, panicked, searching, but there was no body, no blood, no trace of impact, only her cane, standing upright in the middle of the road, as if someone had placed it there, gently. Eli stared, heart thundering, mind churning. He looked around, the square still empty, the clock still frozen at 3:33, the boarded church still silent. The driver called out, "Hey, you see where she went?" Eli didn't answer, because he knew. Maeve hadn't gone anywhere. She'd simply stopped existing, as if her purpose had been fulfilled, and now the town was watching again. Waiting. Chapter 4. The Attic Mouth. It had been raining again, though Eli hadn't heard it start. The windows shimmered with steady rivulets, and a dull gray light filtered through the fog. Soft, muted, as if the day itself was reluctant to reveal too much. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked irregularly, a second too fast, then a second too slow, like it couldn't decide if it wanted to be present at all. Eli stood at the foot of the attic stairs, barefoot on the cold floorboards. His fingertips brushed the rusted edge of the door frame. The door was shut again. He didn't remember closing it. He also didn't remember sleeping or eating or doing much of anything since Maeve stepped into the road and vanished. That memory, if it even was a memory, drifted through his mind like a half-erased dream, vivid in flashes but hollow in meaning. Maeve had said he'd already died once. The house didn't argue with her. The lock on the attic door was gone, its imprint still etched faintly in the wood like a scar that had never healed right. The handle turned with a reluctant groan, and the door opened inward, revealing a staircase steep enough to feel deliberate. The smell hit him immediately, mildew, rust, and something faintly sweet beneath it, like spoiled syrup or dried blood. He hesitated, but not for long. Something was pulling him, not with force, with familiarity. The attic was darker than it should have been. The single small window at the far end was caked with dirt and cobwebs, letting in only a faint trickle of light. The air was thick, humid, difficult to breathe. Eli blinked slowly as his eyes adjusted. There was a bed, small, child-sized, a filthy mattress, its springs bent upward like claws, the blanket half-rotted, the stuffing torn out in clumps. Beside it, bolted to the floor, were chains. 2 lengths of iron links, thick and discolored. Each one ended in a rusted manacle. Scratches scored the floorboards near them, jagged, angry lines etched deep into the wood. Claw marks. No. Fingernails. He saw fragments of them still embedded in the grooves, yellowed and curling, some old, some newer. He stepped further inside, the floor creaking softly beneath his weight. Every surface was layered in dust, yet the center of the room felt disturbed. Not recently, not obviously, but in a way that defied time, like memory had worn down the air itself. The walls were covered in black marks, smudges, rubbings, handprints, some small, others unnaturally long. Symbols had been etched into the beams, circles within circles, and one recurring motif, a star with jagged edges and a slit through the center, like an eye that refused to close. He turned slowly, and that's when he saw the mirror. It stood in the corner, half covered with a stained sheet, an ornate thing, framed in blackened silver, taller than him. He approached it with the same instinct he might approach a grave, quiet, wary, deferential. He pulled the cloth back, and saw nothing. Not a warped image, not a shadow, just empty space. Where he should have been, there was only the far wall, faint and murky. He stepped back, tried again. Still nothing. His pulse fluttered. He touched his face, chest, arms. Still here. He pressed a hand against the glass. It was cold. Wet, even. A fine layer of condensation clung to it, as if something behind it was breathing. Then, very softly, a whisper. Right behind him. "That's not you anymore." Eli turned. No one. Just the room, still as before. But something had changed. The light had shifted. The chains on the floor were now fully closed, the cuffs shut tight. The bed was made. He stared. The blanket, once rotted, now lay flat and tucked. He reached toward it, and something growled. Not loud, not animal, not human. A sound from beneath the bed, from inside the walls, from the mirror. It vibrated through his bones, low and wet and ancient. The mirror pulsed faintly once. Eli stumbled backward, hit the wall. He tried to leave, but the attic door was gone. Not closed, gone. In its place, only bare wall, the same wood as the rest of the room. Seamless. His breath quickened. He turned again. The mirror, the bed, the chains, all still. But now there were footprints in the dust, leading toward him. child-sized at first, then larger and larger. The walls whispered. They said things he almost understood, half-syllables, fragments of names, a lullaby that reversed itself halfway through. Then a phrase, clearer than the rest, one he remembered from the journal. The blood moon comes again. He looked to the mirror once more. This time it showed him, but older, pale, eyes sunken, teeth too sharp. The figure behind the glass smiled. Eli did not. Something broke in his chest. A memory surfaced, hot, bright, wrong. He was 9. He was sick. He was screaming in the attic while his mother wept downstairs. He had begged her not to lock the door, not again. He had bitten her. He remembered that now. Bitten her wrist, drank. His body had burned for days. But when the red moon rose, he stopped screaming. He slept for a week. And when he woke, he couldn't remember any of it. Eli dropped to his knees, gasping. The walls pulsed now, breathing with him, or for him. He pressed his palms to the floor and felt heat rising through the wood. Wetness, blood, thin and sticky, spreading slowly in a circle beneath him. His vision blurred, the mirror's reflection dimmed, and then darkness. He awoke to the smell of copper. The light had changed again. Sunset, maybe, or just that strange, hollow orange glow that never quite meant day or night. He was on the floor, on his back. The attic door open again. His fingernails ached. He looked down. Blood. Underneath them. Dried. Crusted. Lining the tips of his fingers. Not his. His heartbeat felt wrong. Slower. Too deliberate. His mouth tasted of rust. He checked his phone. The battery had died, but the time still displayed for a moment before fading. 3:33 a.m. 12 hours had passed, and he remembered none of them. Chapter 5. The Red Star Rises. It began with the light. Not sunlight, not even moonlight. Something else. A red, low-slung glow that seemed to bloom behind the sky itself. Eli noticed it through the thin lace curtains of his mother's kitchen, the way one notices blood on a tissue. It took a moment to register that it was wrong. At first he thought the window was dirty. Then he thought the sun was setting early. Then he realized it wasn't the sun at all. The sky was bleeding. He stepped out onto the porch barefoot. The air felt charged, humid and metallic, like the moments before a storm. He looked up. There, suspended above the horizon like a swollen eye, the blood moon had risen. Vast, distorted, too close. Not orange or rose-hued, as he had seen in childhood science books, but deep red, like raw muscle tissue. It pulsated faintly, as if it had a pulse of its own. The effect on the landscape was immediate. Shadows were longer than they should be. Edges warped, wavered. The fog, always present, had thinned, but not lifted. It now clung close to the ground in streaks and tendrils, like something exhaled by the earth. And above all this, more than the light, the smell, the impossible moon, was the sound. It wasn't a sound in the traditional sense. Not a noise. It was a pressure in his skull, a low, constant hum that thrummed behind his eyes, a presence, not loud, just persistent, a knowing. The pain had started the night before, but now it was unbearable. His head throbbed behind the eyes, each heartbeat a blade. He had avoided mirrors since the attic, but he could feel the change without seeing it. His body was off. The light hurt. Even the dim red of the moon made his skin prickle. He hadn't eaten in over a day, tried, couldn't keep it down. But his thirst, that had grown. Water wasn't enough. He had, more than once, looked at his own wrist and wondered, At some point, he had clawed at his arms. The marks were there, faint. He didn't remember doing it. He walked, drawn. No destination, but with the distinct sense of being expected. Past the town square, the motionless clock tower still frozen at 3:33. The boarded-up church. The house where Maeve used to live now had its windows painted over, like so many others. There were no cars, no lights. But he wasn't alone. Not anymore. Shapes moved ahead of him. Figures. Hooded or hunched, silent. Residents. Or whatever remained of them. Some carried candles. Others clutched bundles of dried herbs or paper scrolls. They walked slowly, deliberately, feet crunching over dead leaves and wet gravel. They moved toward the forest, toward the trees beyond the cemetery. Eli followed. His legs hurt, his teeth ached. His heartbeat came irregularly now, slow, then too fast, then still again for a beat too long. But he kept walking. The forest opened into a clearing he did not remember. It looked ancient, the trees around it too tall, their trunks gnarled into unnatural shapes. In the center was a circle of stones, weather-worn and blackened, some cracked down the middle. They resembled teeth, and in the middle of the circle, a flat slab of granite, carved with a symbol he recognized, the jagged star, the same one from the attic. And there, on the altar, was a body. Eli stopped walking. His stomach lurched. It took him several seconds to process what he was seeing. The figure on the stone slab was pale, limp, the face slack with death. Blood had dried around the mouth and nose. The clothes were identical to the ones he was wearing now. And the face was his, him, Eli, laid out like an offering, like something killed in ritual. His knees gave. He dropped behind a tree, hands trembling, throat burning. He wanted to scream, to run, but his body refused both. He peered again, unable not to. The townsfolk gathered around the altar, swaying softly. They were chanting. Low, indistinct. No words he recognized, no language, perhaps, at all. The sound undulated with the wind, rising and falling like breath. One of them stepped forward, an older man, familiar in the way of things once forgotten and half recalled. His eyes were cloudy. His mouth moved, but the words didn't reach. Then another stepped beside him, lifting something into the air, a mirror, the same mirror from the attic. They held it over the body, over him, and it reflected nothing. Not the man, not the altar, not even the moonlight, only blackness. A third figure, female, tall, veiled, approached the altar, holding what looked like a bowl carved from bone. She dipped her fingers into it and drew a symbol on the forehead of the body. Eli's forehead. His head buzzed. He touched his own brow. It was wet. He pulled his fingers away. Blood, still warm. He stood, stumbled backward. Branches tore at his skin, the bark leaving shallow cuts across his forearms. He turned to flee, but a hand gripped his shoulder. Cold, thin, familiar. He spun. No one, but the chanting grew louder. Behind him, the crowd began to hum in unison, low, hungry. He turned back to the altar. The body was sitting up, slowly, mechanical, the eyes still closed, the mouth twitching. Eli's vision swam, the world tilted. The red moon pulsed above, larger now, impossibly low. He felt it pressing down on him, compressing his thoughts, his breath, his very name. The body opened its eyes and smiled. Chapter 6. Teeth Beneath Skin. He ran. Eli didn't think about direction, only escape. His body moved with frantic instinct, legs pounding over gravel, lungs raw with each breath. Branches clawed at his arms as he tore through the woods, deeper than he had ever gone as a child. The forest had no edges anymore, no end. Just tree after tree after tree, all bowed forward like they were waiting for something to pass beneath them. He didn't look back. He couldn't. There had been a body, his own dead face watching itself breathe, the clearing, the chanting, the mirror. His mind kept collapsing under the weight of what he had seen. It was too big, too unreal, like remembering a fever dream in perfect clarity. But he remembered. The body had smiled. After hours, or minutes, or days, he couldn't say, he found himself on the road that led out of Black Hollow, the same cracked, narrow path he'd taken when he first arrived. He followed it. Fast, faster. The fog thickened, making each step feel heavier, harder to trust. Trees emerged from the mist like forgotten statues, their roots snarled like veins. The sky bled its dull red hue across the world, the moon still leering overhead like a god drunk on devotion. Then the road curved, too sharply, and spat him out. At the twisted tree. The same twisted tree. He stopped. The gnarled old oak stood just as it had when he'd passed it earlier, blackened bark, split like a scar down its side. He recognized the exposed roots, the broken sign half buried at its base, the single rusted horseshoe nailed into its trunk. He had passed it once. Now here it was again. He turned back, ran the opposite way. Another curve. The tree. Again. He tried it 5 more times, took turns, veered into the woods, changed pace, walked backward with his eyes closed, hoping that some reversal of logic might unravel whatever trap the hollow had become. Each time, the road deposited him at the tree like a glitch in reality, like the world wasn't a map anymore but a loop, stitched crudely at the seams. He sank to his knees, throat dry, muscles trembling. The air smelled of rot and cedar. Somewhere in the woods, something groaned, a sound like rusted metal giving way, low and pained. He didn't look for it. He sat under the tree until the light shifted again, though it never got dark anymore. Not truly. The moon burned too close, too constant. He stopped trying to escape. Back at the house, Eli moved like a ghost, not afraid, not brave, just suspended. Outside of himself, the house no longer creaked in protest at his presence. It welcomed him now. The stairs didn't groan. The floors didn't sigh. Everything inside was still, as if waiting. In the kitchen he found a box of old photographs. He didn't remember seeing them before. The box was labeled Family in black marker. He opened it slowly. Inside were dozens of photographs, some black and white, others faded color. Familiar. At first, his mother, the house, him, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, hospital beds, all things he half remembered, until he didn't. Because in each photo something had changed. It wasn't him in the images. Not exactly. It was his face, but it wasn't his expression. The smiles were too wide, the eyes too still. The boy in the photos, he wore Eli's face like a mask, but it fit wrong. In one image, a school photo, the boy's eyes reflected light like a cat's. In another, his mother sat beside the boy, her hand on his knee, and her expression, subtle but unmistakable, was fear. Eli held one photo longer than the rest, a birthday party. He couldn't say which year, balloons in the background, a cake. And there he was, blowing out candles. But no one else was looking at him. Every other person in the frame was looking past him, eyes slightly to the left or right, as if they knew better. He turned the photo over. In his mother's careful script, Elliot, 9th birthday, the year he changed. He dropped the picture. It landed face down on the counter with a soft slap. He needed to see his reflection. He didn't know why. He only knew that he couldn't trust the photos, the memories, or even the air anymore. He went to the hall mirror, stared into it. And this time, for the first time in days, his reflection was there. He didn't breathe for several seconds. He raised a hand, so did the image. He blinked, so did it. But then, the image grinned, and Eli didn't, not even a twitch. He stumbled back. The mirror figure held the smile for a beat longer, then slowly, subtly, matched his panicked expression once more. Just behind, delayed, like a lagging video. He reached for the mirror, pressed his palm to the surface. It was warm, breathing. He recoiled. In the corner of his eye, something moved, a shape in the hallway, small, crawling. When he turned, nothing. That night, he didn't remember falling asleep, if sleep was what it was. He was outside again, deep in the woods, barefoot. The sky still bled. His hands and face were wet, sticky. His mouth tasted like rust and salt. He knelt on the cold, wet ground, body folded low over something soft, something pliable. He didn't know where he was, didn't know what he was doing, until he opened his eyes and saw it. A deer, its body torn open at the abdomen, ribs cracked, fur matted and black with blood. It had already begun to bloat, and Eli was drinking from it. His body seized. He jerked back, gagging, vomited into the brush, fell onto his side, trembling. Hands soaked, chin slick. The thirst in his throat now felt satisfied. And that, more than the act itself, is what terrified him. He hadn't known what he was doing, but part of him had wanted it. Part of him had guided him here. He stared at his reflection in a pool of dark water beside the carcass. It was smiling again. Chapter 7. The Inheritance. Maeve's house was unlocked. The front door hung slightly ajar, the wind pressing it inward, then letting it fall back into itself. A rhythmic, tired motion. Like breathing. Eli stood on the crooked porch for a long time, unsure if he'd come here with purpose or if his feet had made the decision for him. The thirst in his throat remained constant now, no longer sharp, just persistent, lingering. He was learning to live with it. He pushed the door. Open. The air inside smelled like paper and salt. A faint sweetness underneath, decayed, the way fruit turns after it's been left on a windowsill too long. Dust motes hung in beams of stale light. He stepped into the house carefully, the floor soft beneath his shoes. Everything in the first room was as he half remembered from the last time he'd seen Maeve alive. The crooked rocking chair, the bird cage with no bird, the side table with the glass of water, still full. A fly floated in. It, belly up, legs curled inward. She hadn't been gone long, or maybe she'd been gone forever. The hallway narrowed as he moved deeper inside. It felt longer than it should have been. At the end of it, a closed door. His fingers found the knob and turned it before he could second-guess himself. The room beyond was windowless, lit by a single hanging bulb, no shade, no switch. Just a pull cord, yellowed from years of fingers. It buzzed faintly, flickering once. When he stepped in, he paused in the doorway. And then he saw them. The walls were covered. Sketches, hundreds, maybe more. Paper yellowed, torn, layered over one another like scales. Drawn in pencil, charcoal, ink. All of them variations on one subject. Him. Eli stared. He stepped closer. The drawings stared back. Some were crude, scribbled, almost childlike. Others disturbingly precise, anatomically exact, eyes shaded just right to catch light that didn't exist. One sketch showed him as a toddler, eyes wide, mouth open mid-cry. Another, older, maybe 12 or 13, standing beside a woman whose face had been scratched out. A cluster of them depicted him sleeping, in a bed he didn't recognize. Others showed things he couldn't explain. Eli with blood on his chin, Eli in chains, Eli with eyes completely black. The sheer volume of them was overwhelming. A life recorded in graphite and madness. Maeve had drawn him over and over for decades. But why? On a cluttered desk in the corner, a folder sat open. Inside, a letter, handwritten in tight, anxious script. He picked it up. It was addressed to him. Elliot, if you're reading this, then you've already begun to feel it. The ache in your skin, the thirst you don't know how to name, the slipping, the forgetting. I never hated you. You need to understand that first. I was afraid, but not of you. Of what's inside you. Of what's always been inside all of you. The Mercer line is cursed. That's not superstition, it's biology. It's history. A line bound not by blood, but by a promise made generations ago to something beneath this town. The blood moon isn't a symbol. It's a signal. Every 33 years it wakes, and it picks. Always from the same family. Always a Mercer. The body is just a place it waits in. Eli sat slowly in the old wooden chair. The room seemed to pull closer. Or maybe he was, sinking into it. Your grandfather knew. So did your mother. They tried to delay it. Chains, sedatives, rituals. You were too strong even then. That night in the attic. Your mother said she'd never seen anyone drink that much. You were 9. You didn't know what you were doing. That's how it always starts. They call it a vampire, but that's just the word we use to make it digestible. It's not romantic. It's not even human. It's a parasite of memory and flesh and time. And once it wakes fully, you won't be Eli anymore. The letter ended there. No signature, no date, just blank space. He read it twice, 3 times, then let it fall to the floor. His hands were trembling. Eli stood. He faced the wall of drawings again, studied the ones closest to the door. Some were newer, still fresh with graphite dust. One depicted him not as he was now, but how he looked today, standing on Maeve's porch. She'd drawn him that way before she died. He turned back to the desk. Among the scattered sketches, he found one he hadn't seen yet, a blank outline of a body, his, and within it, drawn in vivid red ink, a set of fangs, but not in the mouth, in the chest, nestled between the ribs, growing. He staggered back. He touched his sternum reflexively, half expecting to feel something move beneath the skin. It throbbed faintly. He couldn't tell if that was his heartbeat or something else. He turned and left the room. The hallway pulsed with stale air, narrower than before. The house felt wrong now, like it had shifted while he was inside it, like a stomach clenching around what it had swallowed. He opened the front door, but paused before stepping outside. The sky had darkened again. The moon was higher, the red star brighter. He walked back through the empty streets. The houses watched him. No lights, no voices, only that red illumination washing the world in raw color. He thought of his mother, of her journals, the lines she'd scratched out, the words she'd rewritten, how she'd rocked him when he was sick, humming tunelessly, her eyes always darting to the ceiling, like she was listening for footsteps above. He'd assumed she was afraid for him. Now he wondered if she'd been afraid of him. By the time he reached his house, the moon was nearly overhead. He stepped into the foyer, the air thick with the scent of old wood and something sweeter beneath it. Rot, decay, memory. He didn't turn on a light. Instead, he walked to the bathroom, stood in front of the mirror. His reflection was there again, pale, thinner. Something pulled tight behind the eyes. He smiled. It did not. Chapter 8. The Buried Name. The cemetery had no gate, just a break in the low stone wall and a crooked sign, once painted white, now a shade somewhere between ash and bone. The letters had faded but were still legible in the weak red light that passed for daylight now. Black Hollow Memorial Grounds. 1854. Rest in quiet. Eli stepped over a patch of withered grass and onto the gravel path that snaked through the rows of leaning, half-swallowed headstones. The cemetery seemed both too large and too intimate, like it had grown wider while shrinking inward, a paradox he couldn't quite articulate. Fog hung low to the ground, thinning just enough to reveal the tops of the stones, all tilted as if listening. There were no birds here, not even the wind, just Eli and the names. He didn't know what he was looking for at first, only that he had to come, that something, someone, was waiting to be seen. A truth whispered through skin and bone and memory, not in words but in a pull, a magnetic dread. He passed rows of names that meant nothing. Wexler, Grain, Holloway, then a line of Mercers, older ones, uncles, aunts, names his mother had never spoken. Then, Mercer, Elliot, born October 5th, 1980, died November 2nd, 1989, beloved son. He froze. The stone was modest, covered in a thin layer of moss. The name was his. The date matched. The air shifted, subtly. A tightness in his chest, a pressure behind his eyes, as if his body already knew something his mind hadn't yet processed. He crouched, traced his fingers over the engraving. The stone was cold, but not in the way most things were cold. It was active, like it held the chill of something breathing just beneath its surface. Died at age 9. He had lived past 9, hadn't he? That was the moment the doubt began to fracture into panic. His hands trembled as he stood. What if he hadn't? What if something else had continued in his place? The memories of school, of books, of college, of women and train stations and brownstone apartments and black coffee suddenly felt fragile, as if they'd been painted quickly over a surface too slick to hold them. They bled at the edges. Details slipped away. Had he ever really left Black Hollow? Had he ever really been? He stumbled back from the grave and turned. At the far end of the cemetery sat a small maintenance shed, unlocked. Inside, boxes of old records, paper, brittle and curled, ledgers filled with names, burial dates, locations. He flipped through them, pages snapping under his fingers, until he found it. Mercer, Elliot, Plot 17, B. Deceased. Unnatural death suspected but officially marked natural causes. Notes withheld by family request. Another record, later. Mercer, Eli Mercer, prefers Eli. No record. Blank. He flipped to the next page. Blank. The next. Blank. And then scrawled on the back cover in handwriting that didn't match the others. What's buried is not what was born. He closed the ledger slowly. Everything inside him felt hollowed out. A borrowed name, a borrowed life, maybe even a borrowed skin. He returned to the house as the moon climbed again. It was higher now, hung heavier. The sky had no stars anymore, only that one massive, bleeding orb. It did not look like something in orbit. It looked like something watching. Inside, the house greeted him like it knew he'd be back. He didn't turn on any lights. He didn't need to. He sat in the living room with his mother's journal in his lap. The pages had changed again. Where once there had been confused notes and paranoid sketches, now there were instructions. One page showed a diagram of a body, similar to Maeve's sketch, but more detailed. Lungs blackened, teeth lengthened, eyes replaced by a red dot. The spine was marked with something like a vine. A caption beneath it read, "Metamorphosis completes in 3 stages. Memory loss is stage 2. He flipped back to the page he had read the night before. The writing had changed. You were never meant to live this long. The ink shimmered slightly, like it was still wet. He flipped again. A sentence appeared as he stared at a blank page. You're not Eli. You're what Eli left behind. He dropped the journal, stood, paced the hallway. His reflection was gone again. No delay this time, just absence. He turned on the tap in the kitchen. The water came out thick, tinted. He didn't drink it. He no longer needed to. He went to his mother's room, sat on her bed. He tried to remember her voice. Nothing came. Just silence. Then something soft, a whisper, not in his ear but from inside. It wasn't a thought. It was a sentence, perfectly formed. You were born the moment he died. He stood abruptly, went to the mirror in the hallway. No reflection, but a voice, not his, from his mouth, calm, old, familiar. The skin forgets, but I remember. He slapped a hand to his mouth. The voice continued. Almost time now. Almost home. He stared at his unmoving reflection, the words echoing from within him. You are not the first. His jaw moved on its own. His teeth, longer now, flashed. The thing inside smiled. Chapter 9. The Hunger Moon. They brought him at dusk. Eli wasn't sure how long he had been unconscious, or if he had ever truly been awake. He opened his eyes to red light pooling across the forest floor, blood-colored and unnatural, casting long, sharp shadows from tree trunks that leaned in like silent witnesses. The moon hung massive and low, swollen in the sky, no longer resembling anything celestial. Closer now, impossibly close, like it had sunk into the atmosphere to watch. To feed. He was lying on his back, on cold stone. He couldn't move his arms. His wrists were bound. Leather straps dug into his skin, taut and old but unyielding. His ankles, too, splayed, exposed, offered. Above him, the trees opened into a clearing, the same as before. The altar was familiar, though he wasn't sure he had ever left it. Maybe he had always been here, lying in this spot. Maybe everything else, the house, the mirror, Maeve, had been memory borrowed from some other version of him, a distraction from the inevitable. His breath fogged slightly in the cold air. Around him, figures gathered, dozens, maybe more, hooded, cloaked, silent. The townsfolk of Black Hollow, if they could still be called that. They formed a circle, humming low, bodies swaying in rhythm with something unseen. Their mouths barely moved, but the sound filled the clearing, like wind in a sealed room. The chant was not language. It was hunger given sound. And Eli felt it. Worse, he shared it. His stomach cramped, not with fear, with want. He licked his lips and tasted nothing but dust and dried blood. His tongue felt heavy in his mouth. His gums throbbed. He tried to speak, to scream, to question, but no sound came. And then, he didn't want to. The fear began to dissolve, slowly like sediment falling in water. He no longer minded the straps. They weren't restraints. They were reassurance. He looked up at the moon again and felt something in him respond. A pulse, not from his heart, but beneath it. A second rhythm, slow and deep, like something long buried now awakening. A vein in the sky, and something in him thirsted. He turned his head slightly. The figures at the edge of the circle moved closer, faces shadowed, but some he recognized: the pharmacist, the butcher, a girl from school, now grown. All of them with the same look, calm resignation or devotion, as if this moment was sacred or deserved. And behind them, in a second row, children, watching, learning. They would remember this. He felt their eyes on him, and he didn't flinch. He felt his mouth curl into a smile. A man stepped forward, robed, tall, his face lined with age but eyes alight with purpose. His voice rose above the chant, not loud but clear. "Blood of Mercer, vessel of our keeping, you have been chosen again. The hollow lives through you." Eli's throat vibrated, a response rising from inside. He wasn't speaking, but something was. From his mouth, a voice answered, "I remember the first." The old man nodded solemnly. "And do you hunger?" A pause, a beat. "Always." The crowd exhaled together, the sound like wind through dry leaves. One figure collapsed to their knees, shaking. Eli watched. He was beginning to see through them. Their veins pulsed beneath their skin, delicate networks of red and black, intricate and exposed. Their necks glowed faintly, their wrists, the soft flesh behind their ears. They were glass. He could break them. He didn't want to. Not yet. But the wanting was there, and it grew. A woman approached, holding something in her hands. A bowl carved from stone, rimmed with symbols etched so deeply the grooves glistened. Inside, dark liquid sloshed slowly, too thick for water, too rich for wine. She dipped a finger into it and reached toward him. He didn't pull away. She marked his forehead with it. It burned. Not heat, memory. He saw flashes, a child locked in an attic, teeth too sharp for his mouth. His mother whispering behind a door. Maeve drawing him again and again, trying to remember what he looked like before it wore his face, before he began to forget. The red star, the man in the woods with silver teeth, a birthright sewn into his chest like a second heart. He had always been, walking toward this moment. He had never once chosen it. But now he welcomed it. The hunger rose. It wasn't physical anymore. It wasn't even separate from thought. It was thought. The chanting faded, replaced by the rush of blood in ears not entirely his own. He looked at the man beside him, the one who had spoken. He could see it now, the tiny pulse in his neck, the warmth of him, the trembling life. Eli inhaled deeply and felt stronger. He tugged at the leather straps. Not out of panic, out of need, out of permission. The old man took a step back. Perhaps he knew what was coming. Perhaps he wanted it. Eli flexed again. The leather stretched, then snapped. One wrist, then the other. He sat up, slowly. Chains clattered to the stone altar and coiled at his sides like shed skin. He turned to the gathered circle, eyes reflecting the red moon overhead. He didn't run. He didn't ask why. He stood, naked, calm, and smiling. Chapter 10. Becoming. There was a house on the edge of the woods, old, crooked, breathing. Its windows were clouded over with time and dust, as if the glass had grown tired of seeing the same things. The porch sagged under its own weight. The door hung slightly ajar, letting in the dusk. The chimney no longer smoked, but sometimes in the right light, you could still see something curling from it. Memory or mist. A figure stepped through that door. Not hurried, not cautious, confident, easy. It wore Eli Mercer's skin. It moved like him, walked like him. The right shoulder slouched just so. The laces on the left boot dragged half undone. It even tilted its head slightly, as if thinking about something just out of reach. But it wasn't Eli, and it never had been. He stepped into the road. The town behind him was silent now, hollow, emptied out. A husk. The houses still stood, but they had gone still in a way that couldn't be undone. The air no longer moved through the branches of the trees. Even the birds had forgotten how to return. Black Hollow had fed its due, and it was content, for now. The road ahead unraveled like a ribbon dropped by accident. The red of the moon had faded, replaced by a soft, innocent dusk, the kind that might fool someone into thinking the worst was over. Trees lined either side of the path, welcoming him into their corridors. He walked without hesitation. There was no need for panic anymore, no confusion, no resistance. The burden of identity had lifted from him like dead skin. He was not haunted. He was not possessed. He was the haunting. Somewhere inside the flesh, the memory of Eli lingered like vapor after breath. He had been a quiet child. He liked books about weather and old maps. He'd once buried a dead sparrow beneath the roots of the apple tree and cried when he forgot where. His mother had hummed to him when he was sick. Her voice had trembled. Even then she knew what would come. Those memories were now ambient. Wallpaper inside the house that was no longer his, faded and curling at the corners, useful only for camouflage. And the creature wearing Eli's body smiled gently at a passing field of corn. The hunger had dulled now. The ritual was complete. It had been seen. It had been known. And that was the most important thing. This time, the townspeople hadn't needed to be devoured, only reminded. They were its keepers, not its victims. A pact centuries old. The cycle would hold again. For a while, and when the blood moon returned, 33 years from now, less maybe, it would wake again. As it always had, as it always would. But this time it would travel. The world beyond Black Hollow was already stretching its fingers toward twilight. Children laughed in yards they would forget. By morning, parents read the news and dismissed the strange lights in the sky. The animals sensed something, but they couldn't speak. The old roads still connected everything. You could take the highway or the back roads, but you'd arrive eventually. You always did. The man, if you could call him that, walked those roads now. He passed a gas station with its lights flickering faintly. He passed a motel with a flickering vacancy sign. He passed a playground, and no one noticed. They saw him, yes. They might even greet him, but they didn't see. Elsewhere, not far, in a different town with a different name, a boy sat alone in his bedroom, looking up at the ceiling. He had been feeling strange all week, dreams he couldn't explain, a pull in his chest he couldn't quite name. In the attic above him, something moved. Not loudly, just a shift of weight, a breath, a suggestion. He didn't tell his parents. He listened, and he heard it again. A whisper, not in a language, but in rhythm, like breath through teeth. Back in Black Hollow, the house Eli grew up in had finally gone still. The curtains no longer moved. The dust had settled for good. In the upstairs hallway, the mirror had turned dark, not reflective, not even glass anymore. Just surface, just threshold. The attic door creaked once, then stopped. Not open, not shut. Waiting. And far away, under a new sky, the man with Eli's smile walked into a diner. He sat in the corner booth. He ordered black coffee. The waitress asked if he wanted sugar. He smiled gently. No, not anymore. She blinked, felt a chill, but she poured the coffee anyway. His eyes, brown and glassy, didn't blink as he watched her neck. Outside, the dusk deepened. The blood moon was gone, but its memory still hung in the sky, unseen, like a stain beneath fresh paint. In a house, far from Black Hollow, a young girl turned in her sleep, and in the attic above her something breathed, very softly. Then, a whisper. The blood moon is rising, and this time, it remembers your name.